All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to grab our hard hats and architectural blueprints to dive into the world of MySQL. It's time to start building.
I want you to think about all the information that powers your favorite websites and apps. It can't just float around out there in the digital ether, right? It needs a home, a really secure, well-organized place to live. So that brings us to the big question. How exactly do you build a home for your data?
Well, you wouldn't just start throwing up walls for a house without a plan, would you? Of course not. It's the same exact thing in the digital world. You need a blueprint for the structure and a rock-solid foundation to build on. And this is where our star player comes in.
So let's meet MySQL. It's a database system, and it acts as that very foundation we were just talking about. Think of it as the concrete, the steel beams, the entire structural framework that organizes, protects, and gives you access to all the precious data your application needs to work.
Okay, so every great construction project has to start with laying that foundation. Let's walk through the very first phase of our build, just getting that initial structure up and running.
You can really break this process down into 4 key steps. First, you've got to acquire your materials. That's downloading and verifying the software. Then, you begin construction by installing it. Next, and this is so important, you secure the site by setting up your passwords. And finally, you open for business by starting up the server.
Now here's a really critical part of that first step, verification. Before you even think about building, you have to be sure your materials are the real deal. You do this with something called an MD5 checksum. It's basically a unique digital fingerprint. By comparing the fingerprint of the file you downloaded to the one the developers provide, you can be positive it hasn't been messed with. It's kind of like checking the seal on your bags of cement.
Okay, the basic framework is up, the server is installed. What is the absolute first thing any responsible site manager does?
You lock the doors and windows. Seriously, this is non-negotiable. You immediately set a strong password for the main administrator, which is called the root account. Then you get rid of any generic, anonymous user accounts that might have come with the installation. And finally, you make sure that main admin account can't be accessed from somewhere else remotely. This is your day 1 security checklist.
Let's move on to the next phase. I mean, a secure but totally empty building isn't very useful, is it? Now it's time to organize the interior and actually start furnishing your data's new home.
You know, a foundation provides potential, but all the value comes from what you actually build on top of it. You need to define rooms, put furniture in them, and have a system for finding everything later.
To do all of that, we're going to need a special language. That language is SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language. Just think of it as the universal language for all data architects. You use it to tell the database how to build the rooms, where to put the furniture, and how to go grab a specific item whenever you need it. You can think of SQL as having 2 main jobs. Over here on the left, you've got commands like create database and create table. These are your architectural commands, the ones you use to build the structure itself. And then on the right, you've got commands like insert, select, and update. These are for putting stuff inside that structure and managing it all day to day.
And just like any valuable property, you have to protect it. There's a tool called MySQL Dump that acts like your building insurance. It creates a complete snapshot of your entire database, structure, and data, so you can rebuild everything if there's ever a disaster. Meanwhile, the grant and revoke commands, those are your access keys. You use them to decide exactly who gets to go into which rooms and what they're allowed to do once they're inside.
So we've built a secure, well-organized house. That's awesome. But a house in the middle of nowhere isn't really that useful. It needs roads, power, and plumbing to connect it to the wider world. It needs to join the digital neighborhood.
And this is a really crucial thing to remember. Your data house doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's just one piece of a much larger, powerful ecosystem of technologies that all have to work together perfectly.
One of the most famous of these neighborhoods is called the LAMP stack. It's a classic, super reliable combination of 4 different technologies that give you everything you need to run a modern web app.
Let's break it down real quick. The L stands for Linux, the operating system. That's the plot of land your house is built on. The A is for Apache, the web server. That's basically your street address so people can find you. M, of course, is for MySQL, our data house. And P is for a language like PHP or Perl. Think of these as the utilities, the power and the plumbing that make everything inside the house actually work.
You know, the source material uses a perfect analogy for this whole client-server relationship. It says the whole setup works just like a post office. You need the building, that's the server, the staff, which are the programming languages, and standard forms, that's our SQL, to properly handle all the mail, which is, of course, your data.
So, how do you, the architect, actually communicate with your building? Well, there are two main ways. The old school way is the command line, which is kind of like talking directly to the building's superintendent. It's incredibly powerful, but it definitely takes some getting used to. The more modern way is a graphical user interface, or a GUI, something like PHP-MyAdmin. This is more like using a sleek management dashboard with buttons and charts that make managing everything a whole lot easier.
And there you have it. Our whirlwind tour of your first major construction project is complete. The blueprint is now officially in your hands.
So let's just do a quick recap. We started by laying a really secure foundation with a proper installation and initial security steps. Then we furnished the interior using the language of SQL. And finally, we connected our new building to that bustling digital neighborhood, the lamp stack. You now have the complete architect's overview.
So that just leaves one final and pretty critical question. The tools are ready, the foundation is set, and the blueprint is all yours. What are you going to build?